Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another FP&A Trends webinar. And the subject of today's webinar is the power of integrated FP&A. And I would like to introduce our speakers and facilitators. We have William Howell online. Will deliver presentation, the case study from Honda UK Manufacturing. For the first time, we met some time ago, and it was not in the UK where we both live, but it was in the US, because you are not only British qualified accountant, you're also FP&A certified professional, and we volunteered together in the US to develop this certification. I know that you developed a number of high-profile integration and analytical projects at the number of companies, but at the moment you're leading this interesting, fantastic, revolutionary project in your company. We're so welcome to have you here. Welcome to the webinar.
Hello everybody, I look forward to talking through a bit of our experience with you shortly. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be in the world. And as Larissa says, I guess most people are enjoying this from their own homes rather than the office environment. Given what's going on in the world at the moment, I am speaking to you from my study in Wiltshire in the UK. Right, so if we look at the project that we put in place at Honda, there were some really big items that I think made this a very worthwhile activity. If you could just skip on to the next slide, we can look at a few of those now. So really this is the question of why should anyone care, and kind of Tanbir touched on this earlier in his presentation about why should someone or why should an organization consider integrated FP&A important? I think one of the key things really is speed, and speed probably goes hand in hand with agility. As Tanbir alluded to, we were able to heavily reduce our cycle time for budgeting and planning, but also for scenario modeling, and having that kind of agility to give very insightful information back to senior stakeholders as we kind of were able to make use of our system on the fly. I guess, how does this pay back to other stakeholders in the organization? Analytics, visibility are extremely important. And I guess the key thing, and perhaps the thing that is most relevant to organizations, most commercial organizations, is that increased accuracy, which really drives bottom line performance. So how did we go about achieving this, and what are the important things? If we just move forward to the next slide, we can have a quick look at those. So in my opinion, there are some key steps involved in implementing successful integrated planning. First of all, you really do have to start with the people, and getting senior stakeholder buy-in is incredibly important. I think if you are fighting the culture within the organization throughout a project to try and implement integrated FP&A, then you're really fighting on too many fronts. And there are some approaches that you can take. We were quite lucky at HUM. The senior leadership were very much on board with this project. However, it might be that you need to try a pilot in a individual business unit or in a kind of division or a department. It's also important to consider the FP&A business partners that you have, and they may well not be in a centralized team. They might be distributed around the organization. We certainly found that that was the case, and we needed to find people who could deliver that business partnering approach with the right attitude, the right buy-in to our culture, and the understanding of what we were trying to achieve. And for that business partnering to work, it has to be a two-way street. So really we had to find the right stakeholders within the business elsewhere, the technical experts in their fields that we could integrate with and bring along with us on that journey. Next, we were looking at the processes. So the kind of planning approach. At Honda, we certainly love a budget. There is a lot of budgeting activity in the organization. And the approach to those budgets changes. Sometimes it could be a very top-down, it could be quite a target-driven budgeting approach. And at other times, we might be required to do a very detailed zero-based approach. It's got to be clear in each scenario who is doing what, who is accountable for which areas, and that really helps. And having that kind of the right people, the right buy-in in place, and the right understanding, everyone working in the right way, was essential. Perhaps the most important aspect of the processes, though, is more about the drivers. Understanding the drivers of your business enables that, to really drive that speed of performance in planning and processing and scenario modeling and delivering value back to the business. And I say drivers in the plural, but we actually found at HUM, really, we only had one true driver that was important to our business when we really whittled things down. We'll come on to look at that a bit more in a moment. The next area, a very important area, is around data, data quality. I would say that when undertaking a project like this, we thought we knew our data pretty well. The more that we got into it, the more we probably realized there were gaps in our knowledge, and we had a lot of work to do in that area. As I already mentioned, having the drivers very clear and distinct is important, because you need to, as you go through the systemizing process, be very, very clear about what each driver actually drives. They're not drivers for just the sake of it. Which way does everyone go? And then, really the icing on the cake is a well-placed, well-appointed integrated planning system, preferably with some good level of visualization. And that really, kind of tops off that integration aspect. Good analytics, good visibility, and a really integrated planning process is very important. Okay, so if we perhaps just jump on to the next slide. So at HUM, we didn't achieve this quickly. It was not something that could be done overnight. And as I already said, there are, I think, 3 key areas of integrated FP&A, and it's very difficult to attack all of them at once. So we had to take it as a process. It had to really become an evolution. So this slide kind of shows kind of our as was to perhaps more of an as is approach, with the pyramid on the left hand side showing really we had a lot of non-value add consolidation, spreadsheet building, error chasing in that process, and then that left us a limited amount of time for analytics and detailed analysis of what we were putting together, and then really a very squashed amount of time to work on presenting the overall output and getting our story together. In fact, a full zero-based budgeting activity before we started this journey was taking in the region of 12 weeks. And really took a hell of a lot of effort from a lot of people across the organization, a lot of which I think was not necessarily adding the value that it should have been. 2 to 3 years down the line, we're in a very different position. We have most of our time now spent on the presentation and storytelling. The way we've achieved that extra time is to cut out a lot of that non-value add work, all that kind of spreadsheet building and linking and error chasing. We have a system that we trust. It's very driver based, and it can produce results for us quite quickly. This also allows us more time in the analysis area, a lot more time on that detailed investigation. So what we've been able to do now is kind of cut down the amount of time that it used to take from that 12 weeks down to more like 4 to 5 weeks. And this has been a real evolution and the people involved have had to really come on that journey with us.
So I was going to say, one thing that really stands out to me on this one is, you've gone from spending a lot of time on spreadsheets to actually a completely different skill set in talking about data and presenting that story. People must have been a massive effort at this, massive focus as part of this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as I said, that first key part was to get the senior kind of C-level or strategic level team on board. And at HUM, actually, that they were really bought into this project. I think the company had gone through a lot of the work that goes with ERP upgrade, and then was ready to start moving forward into new areas. And as I said, finding where the correct FP&A business partners are in the organization is quite important, or I found to be quite important as well. The team that we have together now was certainly much more dispersed previously, and we managed to bring everyone together, and that just kind of helped with making sure that we had that shared focus. We were all within the same culture, and we knew exactly what we were driving towards, what the vision was, if you like, for this kind of goal of integrated FP&A. It was also important to have operational knowledge. The process of building cars is pretty complex. You're bringing hundreds of millions of parts into the factory across a year. They all have to arrive at the right time. They certainly have to be put on in the right order and in the right way. And all of those processes and activities can have an impact on how you plan. So we needed to find the right partners within the organization with that operational knowledge. And then more the technical knowledge side is perhaps more the kind of technical accounting side. So for example, if we were in a situation where we were looking at some of our assets or older assets that needed to be impaired, understanding how that would reflect itself correctly in the financial statements and how that might impact on our planning in other ways.
Okay, so you've got a whole bunch of people now who are ready, willing, and able, have gone through that really critical process. I guess the next step must have been to simplify your drivers and the whole process itself.
Yeah, that's right. And thank you very much for putting a picture of me on the screen.
Looks just like you, Will.
Yeah, unfortunately not. So yeah, as I kind of alluded to earlier, we've said drivers, but actually I've put one driver on the screen, perhaps one of Honda's more famous drivers, Jensen Button, because for our organization, the one key driver for us was how many cars are we going to build within a year, and we make a lot of other things. We make engines, parts, we have technical services that we deliver to other parts of the organization. But actually, when we really whittled away the business and looked at what is going to make a difference in our planning, it's how many cars are we going to make. Now, beneath that, there's a huge amount of complexity. We don't just make one car. We make the Civic, but we export that to over 90 countries. We also make the Type R. There are several different variants of the Civic, as simple as diesel or petrol, Type R or standard model, the 1 litre or the 1.5 litre petrol. And beneath that, there's a huge amount of complexity. All of that, though, can be driven very easily off getting that one driver right. And depending on the level of planning that we're doing, we can adjust our model accordingly. However, having the drivers without that understanding and that approach being correct can almost make them, not as effective as they should be. So, the map on the other side, I'm sure some of you recognize this as the Nürburgring. I probably wouldn't know which way to drive around it if I were to pitch up in Germany. Thank you. And that neatly demonstrates why it is important to have that technical knowledge and that understanding of what the drivers are driving, that direction and approach. As I said, we budget in a number of different ways depending on where we are in our cycle. If we're doing a much more top-down or kind of target-led approach, then we might be much more focused than if we're running a much wider zero-based activity.
So the drivers, once you've got those sorted, you've clearly got a much simpler process. However, I think in my experience, pretty much every single project that I've ever done, the biggest issue's always been the data. How do you get
Absolutely.
to it? How do you model it? How do you store it? How do you present it?
Yeah, so we certainly found this, and as I said, perhaps earlier on, we thought we understood our data pretty well, but actually, the more we got into it, the more we found there were gaps in our knowledge and areas that we needed to tighten up on. So, I guess what I'm painting here, the picture on this slide, is what our kind of as-was situation was. So I think this might be familiar to, I'm sure, a few people, hopefully most people listening. We had a couple of legacy databases that were very much tied into the production line, and they were dragging in, important operational information. We had our ERP system, and then with the best will in the world, we had quite a lot of data that was sitting in Excel or in spreadsheets in various other ways. And as you've just seen, the requirement then comes to pull this data together, and you do that using a spreadsheet, which then kind of multiplies into lots and lots of spreadsheets. And then because you've got so many spreadsheets and they're doing different things and they've got to model data in different ways and nothing's in a cube, so you can't interrogate it in multiple directions, you end up getting a little bit Lord of the Rings about things. You have a kind of one spreadsheet to rule them all, and that has a complex macro built into it to do some consolidation. You have a security complex level of security, and then people are forgetting passwords, and eventually the password gets out so everyone can change everything. And I think this is probably familiar to some people listening, at least. You then end up with lots and lots of spreadsheets really driving your budget. In fact, in our case, if we just clicked forward, there were times when we had around 250 spreadsheets in use across a budget cycle. So you can see where a huge amount of that time got sucked away in managing that kind of estate of spreadsheets.
So you must have had a lot of spreadsheets. Did you find any issues with trying to control, quality of formulas and things in there?
Yeah, I have a firmly held belief that 100% of spreadsheets that have a formula and contain an error, I'm yet to be proved wrong.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few examples in the press around how these formula errors have actually caused major errors across the business. I think the one that always comes to my mind is the JP Morgan London Well from a few years ago. For those of you who don't know, I think it was a spreadsheet that was used for trading, and there was a formula error in there, and the result was they didn't able to set a ceiling price, and they lost about $6 billion on a trade, with another $500 million of a regulatory fine to go with it. I don't think any of yours was that bad, though, was it, Will?
Thankfully not. No, I don't think I'd be standing here talking to you today if they were. No, certainly I do firmly hold that belief about spreadsheets, and error chasing can be a huge problem. So yeah, if we just go, we go through this again. If we just go forward one more slide. Yeah. And again, there we are. Right, so this is more of an as-is situation for us now. So we still have our ERP system in place. We're running SAP. We have some data held in those legacy databases, so DB2 and things like that. We have some SQL data, and in fact, we were able to suck quite a lot of information from some of those spreadsheets actually through an SQL layer. And then we consolidate all of this into a cloud-based system. And this is really our kind of integrated FP&A system, if you like. And for our project, we use board, but it's important that you, if you're undertaking this type of project, you spend quite a lot of time on your product selection. There's now a lot of products out there. Board was the right choice for us, but product selection took us a long time.
In the interest of, just would like to highlight that we are vendor neutral, so other products out there are available.
Absolutely, and you know, we assessed a lot of products, and a lot of them were absolutely fantastic. And it was, as I said, it was almost a nice problem to have, because there were so many good solutions in the marketplace. However, for our particular set of circumstances, we felt that board was the right one. What we really get from this system, it's cloud-based, which is very important. It allows obviously people to access it widely across the organization. You get a lot of advantages that you don't necessarily have with spreadsheets, even with the kind of modern Microsoft 365 approach to sharing. We can all work on it at the same time. We don't have clash issues or anything like that. And you get to access the full power of the data that is sitting behind the planning process and the decisions that you're making. You can drill into what you need to drill into very easily from a nicely presented dashboard or analytics page. You know, even at a kind of C-level type page, they can drill down to information very, very quickly and get down to base data if that's what is needed. It's also where we house our kind of integrated driver-based planning tool. And you know, this, as I said, it cuts out a lot of what was manual work and calculation. And this has been so important in generating the extra time that we've gained in the process. And you know, that integrated tool is very important. And perhaps just to kind of highlight the way that this has supported our project in you know, really capturing the essence of integrated FP&A, the linking of the strategic, the operational, and the planning layer. I've picked out an example that we'll just go to the next slide to look at. So this example really focuses on our CapEx process. So if we're making an investment in the business, for example, if we look at the top left picture, we've decided we're going to invest in some new robots for whatever reason that might be. All of our investments are assessed by the investment committee, and preparing for that could take a great deal of time. And it was also very difficult using kind of an Excel-driven approach to compare projects like for like. So assuming that, like for most businesses, cash is a scarce resource, or investment cash is a scarce resource, so it's not unlimited, there obviously have to be decisions made about where to apply that investment. At the outset, the investment module has the power of integration with all of the other modules within the system. Some data needs to flow into the investment module to help you make your decisions. In this case, we show resource rates flowing into that investment module, so that people are able to know if this project requires people to implement the project, if it is going to cause a reduction in the number of people on a particular process in time. The cost for that is consistently calculated in the right way in the application. This investment module also kind of captures other more qualitative information, things around perhaps environmental credentials, obviously safety, anything that's kind of health, safety, environment is extremely important as well. And it allowed the investment committee to kind of make their decisions looking at multiple projects side by side, scoring them on almost an even basis, and being able to see live feedback as to how that might affect the bottom line. So once the decisions either about what to include in the budget or which projects should be live is made, further integration takes place with the other modules in the application. So if we look, some data then goes back into the resource module. It might be that we need project resources, or as I mentioned before, we're reducing the number of headcount that are required on a process in the future. So this would update our efficiency tables. There also might be a change in overtime. We also see data flowing into the P&L planning module, not only now from the resource section, but integrating directly from investment. So things like depreciation, for example, cost down. Cost avoidance was an interesting one because I'd never seen a system before that could handle cost avoidance in planning. I was very keen to build this in, and I had a vision of how I wanted to do it. I pulled my team together. They came up with another vision of how they wanted to do it, and it was quite a lot better than mine. So we, after much debate, ended up with going with their approach. And then really, the kind of final step of getting, the fully integrated set of financial statements would have depreciation flowing into our balance sheet and cash flow. We've got kind of purchase cost and the project timing. Obviously, all of that is important for knowing the capitalization and the like. So if we skip forward, that I think really summarizes one of the areas where we were able to really link that strategic focus of, long-term investment. What is the business trying to achieve? Where is it going? To the operational side of what do we need to do to get it there? And then the planning or the financial planning side was really done already. The investment module was able to give us things like net book value and net present value. It would give us internal rate of return, and it would give us payback. So all of those kind of financial measures were embedded within the system. And then the planning just flowed seamlessly into the rest of the application, which gave us great confidence that we didn't need to go back over and check things. So overall, I would say that we've taken a lot of time to work through this evolution. As you can see on the screen, it has been a 2 to 3 year process, and it's not been easy. As I'm sure you can imagine, it's taken a lot of time and effort from a lot of people along the way. But what you get from it, I think, has been extremely worthwhile.
So just very quickly then, this has clearly been quite a long project for you. And clearly you were very different at the beginning than you are now. I can see in the picture, you look slightly different in the middle of the screen. If you were to do it all again, what would you do differently? And also, what do you think are the main takeaways from this?
Sure. I think, in terms of takeaways, for me, those 3 key areas that I've kind of covered over and over as I've been talking of people, processes and systems and data. You've got to focus on each of those individually with a view to there being an overall project plan. And perhaps we weren't quite as integrated in understanding how we were going to flow through that journey as we could have been. There were certainly times when it probably felt like we were fighting on too many fronts, but at the same time, my takeaways would be get your cultural buy-in first. If you need to do a bit of a pilot to do it, then that's a great way of achieving it. But get that buy-in and support from the senior parts of the organization first. It is absolutely invaluable to have that and to have that message flowing through the organization as you go through your process. Then identify who the key people that need to come on that journey with you are, get them in quickly, get them focused, and find the people and the business that can help you make it a success. Get your drivers clear, don't have too many of them. Be absolutely crystal clear on that approach, and always be aligned to strategic direction. It's a real risk area where you can lose that kind of leadership buy-in if you start going off on tangents. And then finally, on the data and technology side, break out of spreadsheets. Understand and organize your data first, and then get your system, a fit for purpose system, whatever's fit for your particular solution, for your particular organization. Get it in place, but take your time over appointing the correct partner. We have found that to be absolutely invaluable as we've worked through our project. So thank you very much to everyone for listening to me and my perhaps bit of experience that I've had and that myself and a very large team of people have had as we've gone through this process at HUM. It certainly wasn't in any way a solo effort. I had a lot of support, and I'm very thankful to everyone that's been involved in that project. I think that it's helped us a great deal, and I hope that having a couple of the insights that I've been able to offer over the course of the last 30 minutes or so could be helpful to some of you as you look to move forward with projects of your own.
Thank you so much. I think it's a good timing now to say thank you so much to our sponsor for today's webinar, Board International. Thank you for your great support. And in FP&A Trends Group, we are developing a number of interesting, impactful, really latest webinars with latest case studies. Please stay with us.